Hello, everyone, and welcome to Adopted, the Truth About Family. I'm Diana Inch here in Albany, Oregon, in the United States. And today I am pleased to expand my family by another sister. Please come introduce yourself, share where you're based, and a bit about your story.
Hi, I'm Anna Linde. I'm a transracial adoptee from Brazil. I'm raised in Sweden and I reside in Thailand since a year back. By profession, I'm a certified sex coach, a sexologist, and I work with education, with coaching, and always trying to find where mental health and sexual health intersect so that we don't look at one thing and we think we are looking at a challenge with a holistic perspective, but it's really not. And I came to Sweden when I was 6 weeks old. So I was basically new. Um, and which this is a cute thing because my neighbor, which I grew up with, and I spent maybe 3 evenings every week in her house or in her home. She's from Thailand. So being in Thailand now is a lot for me food wise and spices and taste and also how people look is very similar to how I remember it was when I was growing up at home or very close to home. Um, but that's also, I think this is the typical transracial, experience because even if I look at people here and I feel at home because of how I'm raised, then they don't look at me and feel the same. And this is how it was, well, both because with my neighbor, as I described, but also in my own family with my parents. So I was in the supermarket the other day, and there was a couple who looked a lot like my parents. And I was standing there and I was looking at them with this warm feeling in my chest. And I couldn't help by leaning forward and I was like, sorry, are you Swedish? Uh, and they answered that they were Swedish and they were also from the same city, from Stockholm, where I'm raised. And then we could switch and talk Swedish. And I noticed immediately how confused they are why I am asking and why I am saying that they look like my parents. And it makes me happy to look at them. And that it's painful. That stings. So even if this is the experience, then I think the tricky part is that we get left out or we get kind of isolated in our experience of it. And that's maybe one of the tricky thing about being raised like this, because it's so hard for me to recognize myself in others. And I have to navigate around other things. I have to navigate around how things make me feel or what I'm thinking, or I need to take time all the time to to really consider what is actually going on. Um, and somewhere here, I realized that there is so much that is about the body. There is so much that is about the embodiment of how I'm feeling, or the embodiment or my embodied expressions of something. which took me to the field of profession that I'm in. Because even if I'm raised in Sweden and I lived there 35 years, my children are born there and so on, then when it comes to an intimate conversation or an intimate meeting or a sexual connection, then even if I internalized or inherited all of the Swedish norms and the social norms and all of the things that is included in being Swedish, then that doesn't necessarily match the experience I have or I will have. Which means that I again need to understand, what do I actually need to create it? Or what is included in what I want? Or, it's so many layers of understanding yourself when you have the possibility to separate yourself from the society or the norms or whatever it is that you're living in, the context that you're living. And I think being an adoptee, no matter what this experience comes from, but being an adoptee, I think we automatically do these type of position switch in our mind, like, who am I and who is that, and how are we relating to each other and what is actually going on, and these things, because we don't necessarily know how to mirror each other in our body language, in our families, and also with that, now it's layers and layers and layers, but this, it symbolizes what is actually interesting for me, or what I'm passionate about, or what sparks, what creates sparks in my head. And it's all of this, because also sexual identity is a very important part of who we are. And then you have attraction, which is, an expression of what we're longing for, or an expression of something we think we're longing for, or something that we need right now, or whatever we want to call it in that moment, in that time. But also, what will I be attracted to, depending on where I'm raised, depending on what I heard in my family or in my upbringing, what is okay, what is accepted. And also, how do I know what is actually okay for me or not? Because my life started with people not asking for consent, moving my body, my being from one place to another in settings where it's actually hard to know what happened or what didn't happen. And then consent is the thing here. Consent is, maybe the most important thing we should learn. We need to learn. We need to be supported in understanding, in embracing. So I think that summarizes what I appreciate about my field, but also how extremely interesting this life with our experience can be from different directions, and also how extremely complicated it is as well. But yeah, I think that's me. You're muted.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And what are the chances that the people from your hometown in Sweden were in the grocery store? And I can
Yeah,
imagine their faces as a transracial place adoptee. I can imagine how it would be for them to be confused. Um, and possibly delighted, I would think too. So thank you so much. I have some questions if you're willing to answer.
Sure.
Um, so, how would you describe your experience being a transnational and transracial adoptee? I mean, you gave us a little bit, but overall, how do you describe?
I think I had, I've been very, I'm not sure if you're supposed to say lucky. Well, yeah, maybe. I have been very lucky getting, parents that are actually, able to look at their own mistakes or flaws and really don't know how to figure things out from time to time, but are brave enough to stand in that with me. And it hasn't always been like that. It's been a very long and painful road to get to this place where we are now. But we really made it to this side together because of that quality. And that's a quality within a person. That's not necessarily something that describes a certain person or a certain character, but like it's a personality trait for me that you're brave enough to show up, um, even though there might be a lot of inner resistance. And I think because you grow with the challenges you get. So every time I took on a challenge, finding my biological family, for example, then my parents always answered by also taking on that challenge, whatever it means for them. And sometimes they needed more time to accept it, but they actually did it. And with that, I feel that I really got an understanding of what love actually is, because it is showing up for somebody else when you need to. So for me personally, when you ask me today, like in this thing, then I would say I have a really good experience.
I'm so glad to hear that. Um, and listening to you talk about
Mm.
relationships, um, not just with your parents and family, but also with others. I'm wondering what impact has adoption had on your personal and professional life?
Wait, is it my internet or is it yours? Because you're bouncing. Am I bouncing too? No?
You're steady.
I don't know. I'm steady. Oh, that's an illusion though. But I will say it again. Sorry, ask me again. Just ask me again.
You want me to ask you again?
Yes, say the last question again because you were bouncing up and down, and then I actually didn't hear what you were saying.
So, Anna, in listening to you talk about relationships with your parents and other folks, I'm just curious about the impact that adoption had on your personal and professional life.
Ah, I would say it's all impact from having needing to understand society code, society whatever rules and norms and attitudes and all of these things, to needing to focus on that because I couldn't figure my life out, uh, to spending a short time in foster care when I was 15, 14, 15, 16, um, making it much harder to enter the universities I wanted in the end. So I have a long explanation for the grade system in Sweden, but we don't want to go there. Um, to realizing how many things that are important for me to understand about me, and how to be grounded in the world that is so, changing, and it's fluid, and it's everywhere in the same time. Um, and I think all of these changes, all of these things, all of these, this perspective and that person's perspective, and this person is acting like this and I don't understand it, and so on and so on and so on. And do I belong, or am I only accepted, or is it both? And what does it mean? And does anybody else in this room relate to that, or to those two concepts? Or is it just me? All of these things, they are connected with everything I do all the time. So in that sense, I would say that my adoption is both, the biggest inspiration, but also the most complicated thing ever, or the thing that created most complications in my life too.
For, for sure. Um, are there community groups or resources you recommend for adoptees or those interested in adoption issues?
I would say this is both about where in the world you are, because it looks different everywhere. And also, are you looking for something because you are interested for you? Or are you interested because you want to learn something about somebody else, or for the chance for somebody else? Um, and I think whatever you choose to do, because also, so when I'm in Thailand, I cannot access all websites, for example, because some things are blocked if I'm not using a VPN. And I'm also thinking that could be a thing to remember, that if you're looking for something and you just find exactly the same results, or actually the same, then maybe the real question needs to be, or the question needs to be in that sense, am I looking on the wrong place, or am I asking the wrong people? Um, but one thing that is really interesting right now is to follow how different countries are changing their policies about international adoption, and just reading about the different countries' motivation for it. I think that's a very good place to start.
Yes, good point. There are lots of things going on in the international adoption community, and you shared that Sweden was reconsidering the transnational placements. So,
Yes.
yeah. Um, are there specific issues that, now that the countries are reconsidering things, are there specific issues within the adoption industry that you feel need more accountability and transparency?
I think I would like to see a makeover in all the industry, to be honest. I think personally, I think all of us have a really hard time feeling the amount or the level of trust that we would like to feel. And I think there's a lot of stories, there's a lot of not sorted, uh, problems or crimes that has happened between countries and in countries, which it's a trauma for all of us to read about it, to hear about it, to get the reminder that this could be a part of our starting life too. Um, and it's a similar way where Black people are talking about, Black Lives Matter, and seeing George Floyd, for example. It's a trauma for everyone, everywhere in the world, all the time. And I would love for people to look at our adoption stories and our traumas like that too, that it actually is traumatic for all of us. Um, Instead of just pointing out that, but it's just that person's story, or that's just, one thing there, because that's very offensive. And it's also not holding space for the pain that we're actually feeling in a topic that is, basically coloring every step and detail of our life.
That's so true. Yeah. Um, Thank you for sharing that. I was curious about um, can you share like success story from coaching or workshops that illustrate your impact and your trauma informed approach to coaching?
Yes. So, but there's a lot of manuals or modules that talk about role play and to face the fear you have, and you need to change how you react to it and so on. Um, for me, like that's important, but we really need to look at the situation also, not telling the individual that you have to change your way of reaction or you need to blah blah blah, but rather also look at, is the context or the challenge actually providing the safety we need to be able to react differently? Because that's not necessarily actually the truth. And when it comes to sexuality and sensuality and intimacy, since many of my clients have intimacy challenges or challenges to feel the level of sexual liberation that they are longing for, then we also need to look at that. Like, what do they actually need to feel safe with themselves and with others? And did they actually get support in addressing that earlier? Like, did somebody actually support them in practicing to say no and be held and accepted in that? Or, are we just sliding on what a no or a yes is? And then we go back to the narratives that are centering, adoptees as non-grateful and so on and so on. Then we should obviously just be grateful for bad sex as well. It's like, it's that doesn't match really also for me. Um, so I think, centering the person's experience, but making clear how the context actually looks is a really important step in working trauma informed and not just look at the reactions in a specific person.
Yes, yeah. Well, your work focuses on sexual liberation and overcoming destructive stereotypes. How do you see these concepts resonating with the unique needs of adoptees?
Ah, my favorite question. Um, so first of all, a lot of us feel very ruthless, and we constantly need to look for ourselves, find our identities, and so on and so on, where sexual identity usually either becomes really important, or it's one of those things that we simply don't have time to put so much focus in. And whatever it is, or whatever in between those things, sexuality and sexual connection and a sexual meeting is usually one of those small experiences in time where everything comes together. Because it's not necessarily only, who did I have sex with that day, that year, whatever, but also what happened, who was the one inviting to it, and what did I actually need in that moment? And was it the same what I need now as I needed then? And was it the same for the other person? And there's so many things for me, that's connecting with, okay, so if I still don't really know who I am, then how can I find myself from a sexology perspective? Can I find myself based in what sexual liberation means for me? And can those like really good and inspiring and special moments, can those maybe help me to define who I am and who I want to be? Because then we're back to, reclaiming our rights as humans to have good connections, to feel love, to be able to express it in the ways that we want to. But we're also back in time, recovering, reclaiming, reframing the situation that got us into adoption from the first time, or for the first. So for me, it is connecting a lot. The question is just, how does it connect for my different clients or for different people? And that's obviously always going to be different.
Yeah. Well, and that leads me to my next question, that how does your multicultural background, being born in Brazil, raised in Sweden, traveling around, currently residing in Thailand, how does that inform your sexual perspectives and health education and practice?
Um, so, so it makes me never take anything for granted in what is normal, what is expected, or whatever it is. Because also in every country you're in, what is normal is usually what is legalized. So, like abortion, to go to Bangkok to find somebody. Um, because of different things that I didn't really figure out yet, but that's an interesting. And in Sweden, everybody has that right. So if you need an abortion, you are in the week, before, I think it's before 18 or before 16, then you can get an abortion everywhere. And that's how the gynecologist and midwives works. End of story. While here, that's not how it works. So that I don't take anything for granted makes the conversations and interactions very special and very interesting, because everybody I talk with also learns something immediately about what they think is normal. But what we realize is that with that, sex is always political, and sexism is always connecting with racism and discrimination in different ways. We need to have an intersectional analyze or approach. From my perspective, we always need to have that on every challenge that we're trying to change or to switch, because otherwise we will not clearly understand how this challenge is connecting with other things in the context that we're in.
Yeah, it's it's complicated, right? There's so many things to keep in mind. And um, speaking of abortion, one of the things that often happens with adoptees, that question about, oh, well, you're lucky, aren't you glad you weren't aborted? Where I've really been trying to educate people around understanding that abortion is choosing not to be pregnant, and adoption has more to do with choosing not to parent. How do you feel about that assessment?
Yeah. No, and I agree. And I'm also, and if we look at that question from an adoptee perspective, then how difficult isn't it for us to make that call if we need to? That are we going to keep this pregnancy or not? and how to talk about that and with who, because who understands this? The people we talk with, and in that moment or in those moments or weeks or days or whatever it is. um, and for me, I mean, this it's in those moments where we are forced to face our destiny, more or less, or the other side of our destiny, or whatever we want to call it. um, and it's so extremely important that we are able to sit with that. Like, whoa, this is much harder for me than what I thought. Or this is really not easy. I have no idea how to figure this out. Like, I'm clueless. Like, I don't know. Um, and I also think it's for anyone who gives me that comment, which doesn't happen a lot these days, but it was before, like, you should be happy that you're born, or blah blah blah. It's like, but you don't talk with us like that. Like, don't do that. It's not making sense. It's not making anyone happy. Nobody feels more empathy. Nobody feels more respect. Because for me, that's basically just putting a finger in a wound that I have in my soul or in my heart, and you see if it's open again. And it's like, there's nothing good coming out of those comments. So for anyone who accidentally say this or said this, and I think majority of people, we do these things. We accidentally block things, and that's okay too. But if we can just sit with that as well, like, that was stupid. Like, how? Wow. Like, what did I say that out loud? Like, really? Then that's a really important step in the way as well. So we can just do that, and I think we would be on our way forward.
Yes. It would be a start anyway. So last question. I'll give you a chance to share any upcoming projects or workshops that you're involved with. And if you had one or two tips for the adoption industry or adoptive parents or biological parents, what would those be to make the lives of adopted people, to improve those lives?
And then, first of all, I would like to address shame, because the more shame that we feel about something, a topic, a situation, whatever it is, the harder it is for us to figure it out, how we're going to deal with it. And that's universal for everyone. And shame makes us feel isolated from what we need, from what we're worth, from all of these things that are connecting us with other people and with our values and with who we are. So the more shame you add to a situation, the less awesome it will be. Which could be for adoptive parents, and I this is also something I do, where I'm going to do more the next couple of months, is to have workshops for parents and caregivers from a sexual health and mental health perspective. And then everybody asks, but how is those relating, or why do I need to think about sexual health? My child is just this age and that age. But we know that children today watch porn from about 7 or 8 years, when they are 7 or 8 years old, because this is where they have smartphones, or their friends have smartphones, and so on and so on. We know that it's accessible for everyone, 24 hours, everywhere. And we also know that it is correlating with, shame, with guilt, with feeling that they don't know what they were watching, they don't know what happened. And the same with the conversations about, playing too much violent games or computer games, then it will turn the kids violent. I would really like us to talk more about what pornography does with our ability to create intimate and authentic relationships, but also how can we address the danger about letting our kids learn everything about sexual health from pornography. That I would love for parents and caregivers to just, like man up to and actually accept that as a challenge that we need to do because we need to do it. So that was the tips and the thing in the same answer, I think. Oh,
Yes.
right, because if parents are too ashamed to talk about porn, for example, or sexual health because they feel stupid, they don't know how to do it. Maybe they are sitting with their own, pain of their own being infertile, for example, or whatever it is, that can block them from just showing up. And then again, we need to talk about the shame and being authentic. And it's fine. Nobody needs to know everything. You just need to know how to start. And I can do that, or we can do that together.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. And I'm thinking of that, the emotional vibration and how guilt and shame are at the very lowest end of that. Um and that affects adopted people and adoptive parents, and quite harshly biological parents, particularly the birth mothers, are often down at that zero level of vibration in that shame and guilt. So that's, I'm so glad you brought that up. And thank you so much for joining us today on Adopted: The Truth About Family. Is there any workshop or event, a next project that you're working on that you'd like us to look for you?
Um, no, maybe I would say the opposite, that if this sparks an interest in anyone on how can we actually talk about pornography, for example, or how does sexual health relates with mental health, then just write me an email or catch me because I'm happy to talk about it and I'm happy to create something around that based in that specific client or specific group or specific professional that we're talking with. Otherwise, I'm educating future sexologists and sex therapists on exactly this. Like, how is the adoptee experience of sexual health different? And how can we work with them no matter which challenge they are coming with, connecting with what is actually important to find, and not only, we will fix the symptom. Because if we fix the symptom, then that might turn something into something even more, more quiet, more silence, more loneliness, more isolation, because we can also not focus in something. And we need to find a way out from that isolation too.
Thank you so much, Anna, for being here and sharing your expertise and
Thank
heart.
you. Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed it a lot. And
So
thank you
good.
for what you're doing. Because this is also a big part of changing the narratives and actually making a change. And actually, like you know, it's it's as important as showing up here as what you're doing.
Yes. Well, thank you. We'll catch up soon. And thank you for joining us on Adopted: The Truth About Family. I hope you'll join us for our next episode. Have a good morning, evening, night.